A common question when it comes to what Bible skeptics and liberals like to ask to try and disprove the Bible is, who hardened Pharaoh's heart? Was it God or was it Pharaoh? Because the Bible does say God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he does say Pharaoh's heart hardened his heart. So which one is it? Is there a contradiction? No, there's not. We can see why there's not a contradiction. Exodus chapter 4, verse 21, And the Lord said unto Moses, When thou goest to return into Egypt, see that thou do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand, but I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. So God said he is going to harden Pharaoh's heart. But when we look at chapter 8, Exodus 8, verse 15, But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, and hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said. So Pharaoh hardened his own heart, in chapter 32. And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also, neither would he let the people go. So Pharaoh hardened his heart at least twice. So what does God do? In chapter 12, And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hearkened not unto them. So God, after Pharaoh already rejected God several times now, God hardened his heart. It wasn't at first that he hardened his heart, but it was after Pharaoh rejected God several times. When we look at chapter 9, verse 34, And when Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunders were ceased, he sinned yet more and hardened his heart. So again, Pharaoh hardens his own heart, even after God already hardens it. And in chapter 10, verse 20, But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. And verse 27, But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. So we see that, yes, they're both true, but what happens? Pharaoh rejected God and his revelation several times through the plagues. So what we see here is that because Pharaoh rejected God and his revelation, that God ended up hardening Pharaoh's heart. And we see we flip over to Romans chapter 1. This is a good passage to show what's happened. In verse 20, Romans 1, verse 21, Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts. And this is verse 24. To dishonor their own bodies between themselves, as skip down to verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. So what we see here is that God gives people over after they reject God so many times, and now it's different for everybody. We don't know who is actually reprobated, who has been given over to a reprobate mind. So we just need to give the gospel to anyone, because as far as we know, everyone is a prime candidate for salvation. Now, what happened was that Pharaoh rejected God so many times that he became almost to a point of no return, that he could not turn back to God. And that's why God hardened Pharaoh's heart. But it was after Pharaoh hardened his own heart and rejected God that God decided to do that. Now people will say, but didn't he say that he was going to do that in Exodus chapter 4, and Pharaoh did not harden his heart till later? Yes, that is true, but what we see when we switch back to Exodus and chapter 3, and I believe it's verse 19, And I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not by mighty hand. Excuse me. So what we see here was that Pharaoh's heart was already hardened to what God said. Pharaoh knew that he wouldn't let the people go no matter what. So God knew that his heart was already hardened because God knows all things. He knows the hearts of men, and he knows what's to come. So he knows that Pharaoh is going to reject the first God's revelation after the first few plagues, which is why God said, I'm going to give you over, which is why God started hardening his own heart. So, that's my explanation, and after my study of why there's not a contradiction. So, that's my own take on it, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks.